hand over the presidency of the G20 to the United States at a low-key affair. Following the overwhelming acceptance of the summit declaration, Minister Ronald Lamola said South Africa did not wish to further strain relations with Washington, but believed the handover should be conducted between two officials of the same level, not by President Ramaphosa to a junior U.S. official, as Washington had demanded. And to give us an update, we are joined on the line by a reporter, Bonolo Maribe, who is there. Bonolo, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us on Africa Update.
Good afternoon. Thank you for
taken place. Yes, what exactly is happening now where you are?
No, the handover hasn't taken place yet. It's still expected to happen in Doko's buildings in Pretoria, but I think that it hasn't occurred yet.
All right. Has the South African government said or mentioned who would be doing the handover as a representative for South Africa?
All we know is that Doko has indicated that a senior official from the Department of International Relations in cooperation will conduct the handover. No official names have been released.
And from the U.S., do you know the exact person? Is it the Charge d'Affaires? Who will the exact person? Is it the Charge d'Affaires who will be just receiving that gavel, that all-important gavel?
Oh, announced either. As this is going to be a very low-key affair.
Well, Bonolo, thank you so much for joining us on Africa Update. We'll leave. Well, Bonolo, thank you so much for joining us on Africa Update. We'll leave it there for today. That was reporter Bonolo Maribe, who is on the ground there, just waiting to find out the details of exactly who will be representing South Africa in the handover of the G20 gavel to the U.S. representatives. It is 11 after 12 Central African time, and we're coming to you live from Johannesburg in South Africa.
Você é fluente e você tem documentos que o qualificam para trabalhar na África do Sul? Nesse caso, podemos ter uma oportunidade para você trabalhar no Canal África. Envie seu currículo e demonstração para Canal África @ newsroom@channelafrica.co.za. Lembre-se, se você não receber alguma resposta nossa em 14 dias, isso significa que você não foi selecionado. Canal África, a perspectiva africana.
Africa. It's time to plug into the heartbeat of the continent. Tune in to Channel Africa, your go-to radio station that broadcasts in 5 different languages.
L'Afrique du Sud célèbre la journée nationale du
Kabla hujaitwa kwa jina la Double K
or more of our forests have been destroyed.
Partido Africano da Independência da Guiné.
Channel Africa represents every corner of this amazing land. From Lagos to Cape Town, Nairobi to Dakar, we've got you covered with the freshest news, music, and cultures. So, turn up the volume, feel the rhythm. Enjoy the conversation. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Madapiri pazoshitika
inogeka zingeni chihana lumbiritsidwa kukhala wachiwiri kwa mtsogoleri wa dziko la Malawi pa mwambo omwe unachitika ku nyumba ya chifumu ya Sanjika mu mzinda wa Blantyre. Ndiye pano tili ndi olemekezeka achihana. Takulandirani olemekezeka pano pa wireless ya Channel Africa pa Chinyanja Service. Malawi ayembekezere sotani kuchokera kwa inu ngati wachiwiri winaso kwa president wa dzikolo?
Choyamba ngati vice president umagwira ntchito yopatsidwa ndi president imene yakuganizira. Ndiye malowozi athu atipatsa bwinobwino, koma ntchito yathu yayikulu ndi kuwathandiza president kuti masomphenya awo yakwanitsidwe. Pali zambiri zoti zichitike, nkhani ya njala mdziko muno, boma la udakali chimanga ndi china chomwe chili mdziko muno kuti tithandize ana families are affected. Chachiwiri kunali ma fuel shortages amene akanaliponso apo ndi apo tionetsetse kuti mapamps athu asakhale dry.
zochitika pa nthawi ya 6 koloko kufikira 7 koloko madzulo lolemba mpaka lachisanu ndi madapiri.
Africa Update with Lulu Gaboo, 12 to 1 p.m. Central African Time.
It is 14.
To 1 p.m. Central African Time.
It is 14 after 12 Central African Time, and we're coming to you live from Johannesburg in South Africa. Our Director General at South Africa's Department of Science, Technology and Innovation, Mlungisi Cele, says Africa must be allowed to set its own agenda and policies. Now, Cele was speaking at the first day of the Global X conference underway in South Africa's capital city, Pretoria. The event has gathered experts from all parts of the world to work on key issues like regulating artificial intelligence in Africa, shaping innovation policy for inclusive development, and the future of green industrial development and critical minerals. Tutongobeni has more.
The Global X Pretoria, South Africa, following the G20 Leaders Summit that was held in South Africa, which has placed African leadership at the center of the global innovation agenda, highlighting how developing nations can drive solutions that are inclusive, sustainable, and people-focused. The three-day conference, which ends on Wednesday, is focusing on innovation for sustainable and inclusive development, addressing global challenges such as inequality, climate change, and geopolitical disruptions, particularly affecting developing nations. Delivering the keynote address at the conference, Director General at South Africa's Department of Science, Technology and Innovation, Mlungisi Cele, says Africa must be allowed to set its own agenda and policies.
Africa must be allowed to set its own research, knowledge and innovation agenda and determine its priorities, and should not simply rely on importing STI policy frameworks, methodologies and concepts, but must be allowed the possibility to co-create, if not to develop its own.
The conference is co-hosted by the NRF, the University of Johannesburg, UJ, the Department of Science and Innovation, NRF Trilateral Chair in Transformative Innovation, and partners at the Tshwane University of Technology, the University of the Witwatersrand, and the Human Sciences Research Council. The Group Executive for Business Advancement and Global Partnerships at NRF, Dr. Thandi Mgwebi, says the conference aligns with the NRF and says Africa has been at the helm of innovation. However, this has not been well documented.
Africa has always been ready. Africa is at the heart of innovation. What we have not successfully done is to promote that innovation. Africa's innovation is driven by the youth. Africa's innovation is in the rural communities where Africa is thriving. So Africa is ready. Africa has been ready, and Africa has been championing many of the solutions. If you look, for example, at sustainability, we talk about sustainable development. Africa has been the lead in sustainable development through our knowledge systems, our indigenous knowledge system, our traditional systems that have not been documented well. And the fact that it's not been documented, it doesn't mean that it has not been happening.
President of Global X and UJ's Chair in Transformative Innovation, Economics Professor Erika Krima Mbula, says it takes a while for innovation policies to be in place as they have to include the local communities.
It takes long to get it right, whatever right is, and I'm doing inverted commas here, but to do it better, to keep aligning our aspirations of using innovation and tool and as a driver of inclusive and sustainable development. It takes a very long time to get it right, to get all the voices that you need around the table, particularly communities, not only academics and policymakers. You need communities, civil society to be around the table to really get to the to the nitty-gritty of what is it that it takes on the ground.
Meanwhile, Professor Tankiso Moloi, Director for Academic at UJ School of Business, says it's coincidence that the conference topics were similar to the G20 points of discussions. Speaking about infrastructure, Moloi says that in bigger cities, younger people have access while those in the rural areas are being left behind.
Question is, do we have sufficient infrastructure, so that they can get access to these things? I can give you an example. The Education, Training and Development Purposes CETA asked me to do a study, on the fourth industrial revolution, the technologies that are there, the systems that are there, the infrastructure, etc., etc. Sadly, you find that there are pockets of excellence. So if you go to bigger cities like Durban, Cape Town, Johannesburg, also, then you find that access to these technologies, access to the internet is there, so then there are no issues to the extent. So if you go to some private schools, they even provide these supercomputers so that kids can compute, kids can code, etc. But then if you go to rural areas, then there is no access to even the basics of these things. Like, as an example, so some of the early childhood development centers that we kind of went to interview some of the principals there, they just didn't even have electricity, so that could power the computer. Even if you left the computers, because there is prolonged time of not having electricity at the time, then they wouldn't open that computer. That's one. Two, and internet is kind of an issue. So I come from rural areas, as an example. So sometimes when I'm there, then yes, I have the data on my phone. But then, it will just keep on buffering and buffering. So if you want to supercompute, then it might be an issue.
The conference precedes the Science Forum South Africa, which is a significant event for discussing science, technology, and innovation policies on the African continent. For Channel Africa News, in Pretoria.
Você é fluente em português? É apaixonado por rádio e quer trabalhar na África do Sul? Você tem documentos que o qualificam para trabalhar na África do Sul? Nesse caso, podemos ter uma oportunidade para você trabalhar no Canal África. Envie seu currículo e demonstração para Canal África at newsroom@channelafrica.co.za. Lembre-se, se você não receber alguma resposta nossa em 14 dias, isso significa que você não foi selecionado. Canal África, a perspectiva africana.
Africa Update with Lulu Gaboo, 12 to 1 p.m. Central African Time.
It is 21 after 12.
Central African Time.
It is 21 after 12 Central African Time, and we're coming to you live from Johannesburg in South Africa. Now, as the world marks 16 days of activism against women and children, calls have been intensified to raise awareness of the gender-based violence and femicide scourge. Our Chief Director of Zimbabwe's Gender and Women's Affairs, Lillian Matsika Takayindisa, says ending violence against women and children does not end on December the 10th. Now, in South Africa, the National Prosecuting Authority's capital, Pretoria, authorities' men ambassador are hosting a silent picket in the country's capital, Pretoria, to mark the start of the campaign. Now, Dr. Kuseli Jokani, Deputy Director of Public Prosecutions in the Sexual Offences and Community Affairs, now joins us on the line. Dr. Jokana, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us on Africa Update.
Good afternoon to you and your listeners.
Now, what are you hoping to achieve as the NPA's men ambassadors with your silent picket today?
What we are hoping to achieve as the NPA male ambassadors really is to, amongst others, one, to raise awareness, amongst men within NPA. I'm sure you would recall that gender-based violence is committed by everybody in society, and even us as professionals are not immune to committing gender-based violence. So we've taken this particular stance to say that we have to look inward in terms of really mobilizing, prosecutors, and the staff within NPA, ready to stand up, against gender-based violence and say enough is enough. As you would agree with me that gender-based violence in South Africa has now been declared a national crisis. Therefore, it can't be business as usual. That's why we decided to take this particular stand to say that enough is enough. As NPA men, we are mobilizing men inside NPA and also outside NPA, within the institution itself, and also outside in our communities, in our streets, in our churches, everywhere where we meet as people to raise awareness around the dangers that is occasioned by gender-based violence. You would understand that
now. What specific strategy? Now, what specific strategies and initiatives will the MPA implement during the 16 days of activism campaign just to combat GBV, and how will these efforts be sustained beyond the campaign period? Because beyond the campaign period, this is where it's very key.
You're quite correct. You see, for us, process that is sustained, beyond the 16 days. It must be an ongoing. That's why, as NPA, we have taken this particular position as male ambassadors, because our view is that in every corner, in every court, in every office, we must have these male ambassadors so that we're able to spread, the word against gender-based violence, to ensure that men of NPA are taking an active role in ensuring that gender-based violence is prevented. Remember, much as we are professionals, but outside of our profession, we are members of society. We need to go back to street by street, to our churches, to our taxi rank, and spread the word against gender-based violence. That is what we hope we are going to achieve by engaging in this particular exercise. Because for us, we foresee that this is going to be a long program that we're going to engage with as NPA men to ensure that it doesn't end on the 10th of December, but it goes beyond that up until gender-based violence is nipping the bud in the Republic of South Africa, because it has now been declared a national crisis. That gives you a sense that we're facing a very problematic situation that we need to mobilize everyone in society, more particularly prosecutors, to ensure that they play an active role in terms of raising awareness around issues of gender-based violence.
Now, speaking particularly of prosecutors, what are some notable successes or challenges the NPA has faced in prosecuting GBV cases, and what lessons have been learned to improve future outcomes?
Cases of gender-based violence is that there is still a lot that needs to be done in terms of educating our people about the dangers, of gender-based violence. For instance, in a situation where, for instance, victims, are abused within institutions like churches, like in offices, like in institutions, both public and private institutions, people tend to not to report those cases. And if they do report those cases, they are so scared, of coming forward and speak against people of power to say that gender-based violence, must be frowned upon. So we're saying as NPA, having learned those lessons from the cases that we have done, we want to ensure that we really play our part in terms of raising, the level of understanding around GBV, focusing mainly on prevention and encouraging victims to come forward and report these cases. But one of the fundamental challenges that we're facing, people are afraid to report these cases because they might lose their jobs, they might lose the livelihood that are being provided by their spouses. So all what we're trying to say now, we want to deal with those barriers to ensure that we encourage people to come forward so as we're able to deal with the whole problem of impunity in relation to gender-based violence.
Now, Dr. Jogani,
of impunity in relation to gender-based violence.
Now, Dr. Jogani, given that South Africa has some of the world's highest rates of femicide, yet one of the lowest conviction rates for GBV-related crimes, often below 10%, what concrete, measurable commitments will the NPA leadership announce today to address the chronic delays, secondary traumatization of survivors, and loss of dockets that collapses cases long before they even reach the courts?
Is to strengthen, capacitation of our prosecutors in terms of how they deal with cases of gender-based violence. We have already started that process of ensuring that we invest in our prosecutors to train them so that they are able to deal with complex cases of gender-based violence. The second part, to our strategy as NPA is to ensure that we roll out more to Tuzola care centers. Tuzola care centers is a model that is renowned worldwide for its success. And even here in South Africa, we see some of the successes that the Tsoraka Center is providing in terms of ensuring that, amongst other things, we provide pre-trial services to victims and psychosocial services to victims so that they're able to go and testify and confront their perpetrators in court. Because one of the problems with victims of gender-based violence, they don't want to come forward and report these cases. Even if they do so, they get so threatened. That's why now the Tsoraka Center model comes handy in terms of assisting us, in terms of ensuring that victims are assisted so that they're able to go to court and give evidence that can stand so that we can be able to secure those important convictions. So that, as you correctly said, we can improve the conviction rate that you're talking about, which is less than 10%, as you said.
Now, in a
which is less than 10%, as you said.
Now, in a country where over 80% of reported gender-based violence perpetrators are men, how effective can male-led initiatives be if they remain partially symbolic, such as silent pickets, rather than driving systemic changes in patriarchal attitudes within the justice system? How does it then move positively going forward, where inclusively prosecutors and investigators are among them?
In the sense that what we're doing now is to ensure that we raise the level of awareness and more so invest on our male prosecutors to ensure that they are trained around issues of social conduct so that they can be able to understand what are the drivers, of gender-based violence. It is very important that men take the lead, because as you would agree with me, that many people that are committing and perpetrating these offenses are male. Therefore, it becomes very critical to ensure that the very same men who are perpetrators of gender-based violence are leading this campaign against gender-based violence. Because who else can lead this campaign other than men to ensure that really we lead the country in terms of raising awareness to deal with this scourge of gender-based violence. It cannot be business as usual when every minute, a woman or a child is being abused, by me. So that's why we've taken this principled position to say that men should take the lead, because they are the ones that are perpetrating and committing these offenses. For too long, we've been focusing on educating women in terms of do's and don'ts. But as you correctly said, we have to deal with these patriarchic tendencies, focusing on me, because they are the problem.
Well, Dr. Jogani,
focusing on me.
Well, Dr. Jogani, we have run out of time and are going to have to leave it there for today. Thank you for joining us on Africa Update.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
That was Dr. Mkhuseli Jogani, Deputy Director of Public Prosecutions in the Sexual Offences and Community Affairs, joining us on the line. Our news headlines up next with Matapelo Mahape.
Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Lulu. Headlines this hour. The National Prosecuting Authority of South Africa has initiated specialized training for prosecutors on gender-based violence to improve sensitivity and effectiveness in handling such cases. And South Africa's ad hoc committee investigating criminal infiltration and corruption in the justice system is holding hearings at the Kgosi Mampuru Correctional Facility in Pretoria, where witness Vusmuzi Matlala is detained. The committee's decision follows allegations made by KwaZulu-Natal Police Commissioner Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi in July. Currently, SAP's Chief Financial Officer Bulenge Dimbani is testifying. And EU countries are required to recognize same-sex marriages between EU citizens lawfully concluded in other member states, as ruled by the Court of Justice. More details on these and other stories at top of the hour.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective. Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
It's a very good afternoon from the sports desk. I am Musibudi Makura with the latest sports news at this hour. So Tristan Stubbs completed a half century to help South Africa reach 220 for the loss of 4 wickets at lunch earlier on today for a mighty lead of 508 runs in their second innings, having lost just 1 wicket in the afternoon session of the 4th day's play in the second test against India at the Baspara Stadium in Guwahati earlier on this morning. Tony Dizozi, meanwhile, batted with a positive intent to reach 49 from 68 deliveries, including hitting 4 fours in the process. So India essentially will then set a target of 549 to win the second test. It stumps on day 4, and India currently on 22 for the loss of 2 wickets, meaning tomorrow is the 5th and final day of this test match, and South Africa will be looking to bowl out India before the end of play, while India will be hoping to, by a miracle of some sort, to get a win out of this encounter. Of course, South Africa currently leading the series 1-0 on the brink of history. They win the series. South Africa will win their first ever series in India in 25 years. So a lot on the line for the Proteas. On to this now. South Africa's Springbok scrum guru, that is Dan Human, was not giving away any trade secrets after the box scrum completely dismantled Ireland over the weekend. Human embodies the humility the Springboks strive for regardless of the many achievements on the world stage. The Springboks' final match of the 2025 season against Wales is at the Principality Stadium in Cardiff on Saturday night. Human wants to stay away from the favourite tag ahead of that match in order to show respect to their opponents.
There is only 1 game left, so we're looking really into that, and that'll be great. That'll be a great achievement if you can get that right. But I don't think we're thinking the whole time about the records or, unbeaten on tour. We just think about the next game.
And don't expect any insight on these scrums just yet. While the Boks-dominated Ireland, Human is not ready to start heralding the Boks scrum, not when there is still 1 more opponent to face this coming weekend.
Yeah, what can I say? My father always tells me, don't tell me what you're going to do, tell me what you have done. So I'll basically keep it to that simple.
On to this now. The Lesotho Football Association this week opened its CAF A licensed diploma course, attracting 23 coaches from across the African region, or rather across the Southern African region. Among them is Bafana assistant coach Helman Mkelele. The important CAF A diploma course officially began at the Mbambata Tsisa Sports Arena in Maseru, Lesotho. The program is led by renowned CAF as well as FIFA educator Serame Lutswaka, assisted by local instructor as well as CAF graduate Nelly Tsilo. Namkelele says enrolling in the CAF A license course is part of his commitment to strengthening his coaching credentials and preparing for the future, where he is likely touted to take over from Coach Hugo Bruce when he retires next year.
And first and foremost, I would like to first thank LIFA, the Lesotho Football Association, for creating an opportunity for me to be part of the student, because it's not an easy thing especially for a foreign coach to come and be provided with an opportunity to gain knowledge. Because as I'm here as a coach, it is important that, number one, you have the necessary skills and knowledge on how to develop players.
And finally, former Wimbledon finalist Nick Kyrgios has signalled his intention to play at next year's Australian Open by signing up for the Wuhan Classic warm-up exhibition event. Now, the Australian has been ravaged by career-threatening injuries over the last couple of years and played only 5 single matches in the 2025 season, the most recent at the Miami Open in March of this year. Now ranked 666th in the world with no protected ranking, Kyrgios will need wildcards to play any of the ATP warm-up tournaments ahead of the Australian Open as well as the Grand Slam tournament itself. Now, those wild cards are likely to be forthcoming if requested, given Kyrgios is a former champion at the Brisbane International as well as a perennial crowd favourite at Melbourne Park. Kyrgios was already scheduled to play other exhibition matches before the end of this year, including his Battle of the Sexes clash with Aryna Sabalenka set for the 28th of December in Dubai.
Well, that is a wrap from the sports desk at the Sawa. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za. Call us as well on +27 11714 4459. So I'm back with more sports news in the next hour for Channel Africa Sport. I am Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Nkhanza zokhudza amuna ndi azimayi kapena kuti gender-based violence GBV zikuwononga miyoyo komanso kuphwasula midzi. Zikuchitika m'manyumba, m'masukulu, malo ogwirira ntchito ndipo kwambiri mwakachetechete. Koma sizikuyenera kupitirira. Mukazimva yankhulani. Ngati mwakhuzidwa funani chithandizo. Chifukwa kusachita chilichonse sikuthandiza. Mverani kuma wireless onse 14 a SABC kuchokera lachitatu pa 23 mwezi uno wa Julai kuti mumve zokambirana, malangizo, masewero, zionetsero za maphunziro ndi mafunso okhuza nkhanza za amuna ndi azimayi ndi akatswiri, anthu opulumuka ku nkhanzazi, kukhazikitsa lamulo komanso dziko lonse lokhuzidwa ndi nkhanzazi. Zonsezi pa wireless yomwe mumayikonda ya SABC. Imbirani pa nambala 0800 428 428 kuti munene za nkhanzazi kapena kupeza chithandizo. Nkhanza zokhuza amuna ndi azimayi zimatha ndi inu. Uthenga ukufikani kuchokera ku SABC.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Good afternoon. Our top business story this hour: Nigeria's Dangote has tapped Honeywell to provide services and help double its refining capacity to 1.4 million barrels per day by 2028, in what is the clearest indication yet that it plans to become the world's largest petroleum refinery, are bearing fruit. The agreement will allow Dangote to process a broader range of crude grades to help support the planned expansion in output. With the help of Honeywell's catalysts and equipment, Dangote will also look to increase its production of polypropylene, an industrial material widely used to produce plastic containers and car parts, to 2.4 million metric tons per year by licensing Honeywell's Oleflex technology. A macroeconomist and economics lecturer says Malawi's structural weaknesses need to be urgently addressed. Dr. Bertha Bangara Chikadza from the University of Malawi made these comments ahead of President Peter Mutharika's urgent call for support from the International Monetary Fund. Mutharika says Malawi needs immediate resources to secure critical imports as the country faces a delayed farming season and recurring fuel queues. Bangara Chikadza comments.
All right. I think, like I said initially, this is an agricultural-based economy. But because we are an agricultural-based economy, even our farming methods are old. They are obsolete. We are using hose. We are not irrigating. We are not, doing anything that is extra or out of the ordinary.
South Africa's integrated payment system has been regarded as advanced and suitably placed to complement its international partners. The 18th plenary of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development Forum on Tax Administration echoed this earlier, that international tax collaboration is more critical than ever before. During the plenary, heads of tax administrations made a commitment to advance joint initiatives aimed at easing compliance pressures on taxpayers and strengthening cross-border efforts to close tax gaps. The CEO of Latita Africa, Jermaine Manikas, says South Africa was punching above its weight.
Now, South Africa being on the benchmark of some of this advanced technology, I think we're still ahead of the pace. So we are to still allow the rest of the world to catch up, I guess.
As the festive season approaches and year-end parties kick into full swing, South Africa's National Financial Ombud scheme is warning motorists if you drink and drive, you could lose not only your license, but your insurance cover too. The NFO's non-life insurance division says it's seeing a spike in complaints from drivers whose accident claims were rejected because they were suspected to be under the influence. Motorists should be aware that insurers don't need a positive blood alcohol or breathalyzer test to turn down your claim. CEO of the Ombudsman for Short-Term Insurance, Edith McKinnon, explains.
Driving under the influence is not only, of course, illegal and against the law, but in most insurance policies where you cover or insure your vehicle, if you are found to have, on a balance of probabilities, been under the influence of alcohol or any other intoxicating substance, the insurer has the right to reject your claim, even go as far as rejecting your policy. In other words, deciding to cancel your cover.
The EU and US ministers have been meeting to discuss implementing a trade agreement reached in August. The EU Trade Chief, Maros Sefcovic, held talks with the US Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnick, in Brussels. Lutnick says the EU should loosen its regulation of the tech sector in exchange for a reduction of US tariffs on metals.
Our suggestion is that the European Union and their trade ministers deeply consider trying to analyze their digital rules, try to come away with a balance, not put them away, but find the balanced approach that works with us. And if they can come up with that balanced approach, then we will handle the steel and aluminum issues and bring that on together.
And our first look at the indicators this afternoon. $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,453 naira. In Botswana, it's at 13 pula 32 this afternoon. In Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shillings 67, and Zambia 23 kwacha and 5. The BRICS countries, $1 in Brazil is trading at 5 rial 39, Russia 78 rubles 38. In India, it's 89 rupees 21, China 7 yuan 10, and South Africa $1 is trading at 17 rand 31 cents this afternoon. $1 is trading at 76 pence to the British pound and 86 to the euro. Looking at commodities, gold is higher a bit. It's at $4,133 per ounce. Platinum at $1,549 per ounce, while the price of Brent crude oil is at $63.15 a barrel. And those are your business news. I'll be back with another update in the next hour. For Channel Africa Business, I am Bontle Hetbush.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Your window to the continent and beyond. Africa Update. Only on Channel Africa. Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Well, thank you to Buntle Hetbush with our business news. Well, thank you to Buntle Hetbush with our business news. It is 12:46 Central African time, and we're coming to you live from Johannesburg in South Africa. The G20 Global Inequality Report has highlighted severe education disparities, showing that while wealthy children have a 1 in 2 chance of studying beyond secondary school, the odds drop to 1 in 40 for poor boys and just 1 in 100 for poor girls. In South Africa, the divide is rooted in early childhood development, where many rural ECD centers lack proper facilities and trained staff. Now, this is according to Santa Shoebox Project Chief Executive Officer Deb Zelezniak, who says thousands of centers are fighting to survive, warning that poor early learning undermines future opportunity. Zelezniak joins us on the line to discuss this further. Deb, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us on Africa Update.
Lulu, thanks for having me. This is an all-important issue, and I'm very pleased it was raised at G20, but of course that doesn't...
Why early childhood development, the quality one, in fact, is considered the most powerful tool for breaking the cycle of poverty?
It's an intergeneration who did not have the opportunity to attend school, usually often all the way through to matric. Their children and their grandchildren are unfortunately still facing similar challenges. In rural areas, and we're talking about 8.8 million children in South Africa living in rural communities. These kids simply do not have access to the Thrive by 5 early childhood development in support of their developmental milestones. You know, when a child is 5 years or younger, the rate of brain development is unrepeated. And if that opportunity to educate is not met, the children are on a back foot for further development, for their school careers, and certainly have no option of acquiring a tertiary education.
Now, what
a tertiary education?
Now, what is the current state of under-resourced ECD centres, in South Africa, and how does this affect a child's readiness for formal schooling?
Great question. So those 8.8 million children, most of never having held a book in their hand, completely illiterate. They reach the age of 9 or 10, which is grade 3 or 4, also illiterate. You know, the centres do the very best they can with exceedingly limited resources. We think we're facing a challenge in urban areas, but in rural areas, there is no electrical grid, never mind one that fails from time to time. Children walk to school along rural paths, no shoes on their feet, for kilometers in the dark. They're hungry. We know the tourism, you can't teach a hungry child. The women who look after these children are themselves often untrained. You know, the Department of Basic Education is doing their utmost with a Banapele registration drive to account for every early childhood development centre in South Africa. But of course, the far-flung rural communities, the ECDs in those communities, don't have access to the Banapele registration drive. So that, of course, means that they're not registered on the department's system. It means that they're then not eligible for the child grant, which now we know is meant to be 24 Rand per child per day, up from 17 Rand. Even 24 Rand, should they receive it, is insufficient to maintain infrastructure, to train teachers, to feed the children, to have the necessary educational resources to ensure that these children's developmental milestones are addressed. It's a very, very difficult conversation. Milestones are addressed.
Why are government policies why are government policies and intentions around ECDs not translating into quality care and support in rural communities? We keep speaking about the same things over and over again annually, and nothing seems to change. Why is it not changing?
To provincial challenges. We know that there are municipalities, provincial departments, which are not carrying out the instructions, the mandate of getting the funding, getting the support to the children. It's not happening. Accountability, I think, is where the national government is falling short. People who do not, ministers, people in power, who do not carry out the national instruction should be held accountable and brought to book. We do understand. The Santa Shoebox Project understands the challenges of reaching rural children. But when it is all important, don't look away.
Now, Deb,
all important. Don't look away.
Now, Deb, we have run out of time, and I have to ask you this. If you don't mind just staying on the line with us, and we'll come back to you, because I feel that this is very important, especially just unpacking where the private sector can become a part of this and what they can do to assist in improving, especially when it comes to early childhood development. Just give us about 2 minutes. We will come back to you, Deb, if that would be okay with you. The Santa Shoebox Project Chief Executive is the Santa Shoebox Project Chief Executive Officer, Deb Zelezniak, joining us on the line. She will come back and join us and just continue with this conversation as Tebogo Kuleni of The Upside joins me live here at the Gold Reef City theme park, and we are all here How are you How are you doing? Welcome and welcome back. It's been a while.
Thank you very much. I feel very special because I came back to the
amusement parks,
and
yes.
it's basically Channel Africa's management saying, let out your inner child.
Of course.
And I am all for it. Here's what's coming up on the upside this afternoon. We discuss cosmetic dentistry. Long has it been sort of reserved for the upper class, those who can afford it. But now more and more people are getting cosmetic dentistry work, from veneers to whitening, but they want it to look as natural as possible. Not Hollywood, but as natural as possible.
We're seeing a lot of Hollywood, though.
Are you still seeing Hollywood?
Oh, yeah.
Where?
The bright white.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right, but
talent is even nodding.
Okay, but they're trying to go for a more natural one. I guess they're not succeeding that well. And then we get into conversation with Chris Burtish. He's an author who wrote the book Super Stoked. It's a self-help book about how he navigated from South Africa, going all the way to America to surf on the largest waves ever recorded.
Wow.
And he ended up getting some silverware, brought it back, and he wrote a book about serving and living with purpose, and he's bringing it back now to South Africa. It's been a bestseller to motivate youngsters and also shine light on heroes in communities who are doing the utmost supernatural things that we're not really talking about. So it's going to be an exciting conversation with Chris, and then our final conversation, we get into conversation with Joanne Reyneke. She is on the screens right now, Bad Influencer on Netflix. We'll be talking about the amazing work that she's doing. That's all coming up on the upside.
That's the upside coming up from at the top of the hour with Tebogo Lekuleni and Matsiko Musito. And, I do have Dr. Deb Zelezniak, who is on the line joining us, and she is from the Santa Shoebox Project, and she is a Chief Executive Officer. Dev, much appreciated for you to stay with us as we continue this very important conversation. The private sector, how do they get involved, and how much do they need to do to ensure that they play a part and play their role?
As is, and the private sector are stepping up into the great gap that is left by government. And that's specifically in our case, the case of the Santa Shoebox Project, is early childhood development. We know absolutely, and it's been proven, it's not simply an opinion, that should a child not receive a quality early childhood education, they're ultimately not going to become contributing members to society. That's the bottom line. They're in fact going to cost the country with antisocial behavior, possibly criminology. I mean, there are huge risks to neglecting a child in their formative years. So I call upon the private sector to partner with credible NPOs, and I use that word, credible. NPOs that consistently deliver, NPOs that underpromise and overdeliver, NPOs with experience in the field that resonates with the private investor. If literacy is what you believe is the most important, and you've done your research and you've established the NPO that's working in literacy in your province, in your community, reach out to them and support them. Of course, government has incentivized the private sector supporting NPOs with tax deductions made to NPOs that are registered as public benefit organizations, of which the Santa Shoebox Project is, of course, one. I will blow our own trumpet here and point out that we have built 7 early childhood development centers in rural areas from the ground up, on time and within budget. We also address literacy with reading corners in under-resourced early childhood development centers, and we provide training. All of these things are in support of the Department of Basic Education's requirements for registration. So should the Banapele drive succeed as it plans to, and should provincial government ensure that the allocated funds reach the children, these ECDs are well positioned to take full advantage of that. And that is our hope.
And Deb, what can an ordinary South African do?
Our hope.
And Deb, what can an ordinary South African do? Somebody who wants to get involved in Banapili and continue with that policy or children first. So how do individuals get involved and be a part of it?
Look, of course, I say volunteer. There is a history of money not reaching their intended beneficiaries.
The right, yes.
But everybody has time. everybody has time, join a reading program for an under-resourced school in your neighborhood. The brothers and sisters, the drive where you can mentor a child in need or a young person at risk, I think is an outstanding offering. The Santa Shoebox Project has enormous opportunity for volunteering nationwide. And I think, don't sit back and think that the problem is too big to address, because ultimately it's one child that can become their very best self and become that citizen that contributes to our future society. It's a cliche. The children are our future, and I don't like citing it. But the bottom line is every child has the opportunity to become their very best self, but they do require support that is not easily available.
Deb, it's been
support that is not easily available.
Deb, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us on Africa Update. Santa Shoebox Project Chief Executive Officer. That's Santa Shoebox Project Chief Executive Officer Deb Zelezniak joining us on the line. And, continue with us on our social media platforms as we are still here at Gold Reef City Theme Park. And, when you see the team getting excited, everyone laughing, having a good time, it's very interesting to see it all unfold. As we wrap up here, our broadcast, we will be back in studio in Auckland Park tomorrow. Thank you so much for joining us on all our platforms, and continue with us on all our social media platforms, and let us know your thoughts and your views on everything that you are listening to and watching and hearing on Africa Update and Channel Africa. It is goodbye, and we'll be back tomorrow, same time. The Upside coming up after the news.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Lulu, and good afternoon.